Hi guys, and welcome again to another critique with me, your extremely nerdy and dorky host, Mike Kelley. This edition brought to you by my extremely long hair. Today we are going to be critiquing Robert Robert Umenhofer photography. Robert is, I believe, in Boston and sent in a portfolio of about 10 different images for me to go over and critique. So again, for those of you who are new and just tuning in, I want to let you know this is a critique for people who have purchased some of my educational tutorials in the past. And if you are a member of the Facebook group that I run called, I believe, Architecture Photography with Mike Kelley, we have a link in there, and you are more than welcome to submit any projects or portfolios that you want me to talk about live here on the YouTube channel. So let's get started. So this is the first image from Robert, and he says this is a college rotunda for a construction company. Now, the first thing that I see about this that I'm not totally in love with is the composition. It seems like it's a little bit front heavy, and it just kind of feels unbalanced, like the building is not really sort of anchored in the frame. It's just floating above all that grass, and the grass isn't adding anything to the composition. So you could, in my opinion, either move closer, or if you had a tilt shift lens, just shift up. My personal preference here would be to move closer and to shift up. Because we're so far back, you said this is for a construction company, so I'm going to pretend that that's what we're doing here. You can't really see any of the fit or finish detail, which is super important for a construction company. I mean, yeah, you have a nice wide overall view, but right now it's more of a picture of a building rather than a photograph of architecture, if that makes sense. The lighting on the right-hand side looks like all in here is dark or turned off. I don't know if you had access, but I totally would have tried to get those lights on. If not, there's some post tricks that you can use to kind of take the left-hand side, flip it over to the right-hand side. Yeah, so I would move closer, shift up, deal with the composition a little bit. And then another thing that jumps out at me is it looks like there's like this burnt edges around the top and around the crown of the building there. And it looks like you used a brush to kind of brush in a darker sky, but some of that darkness sort of carried over onto the building. And that kind of, I don't know, you should have a nice, consistent, smooth exposure across the front of the building. It just jumps out as something to me that could be easily fixed by using the pen tool instead of a big brush when you were brushing in your darker sky. Next up, we have a bathroom here, shot for a residential builder. To me, this seems a little bit flat, mostly because the light levels throughout the entire image are pretty similar, even though you have that big black sort of wall right here. I don't really know what to look at because everything is so bright and nothing really comes forward or moves backward in the frame. There's not a lot of rhythm in the photograph as a result of that, again, because everything is equally bright. There's no real shadows. It's hard for me to tell what is where at first glance. So I would have, probably come at this by using this as the main light source and having nice soft light sort of wash over everything from the back rather than lighting everything. A lot of what I see looks like it was lit from the same direction as the camera, which is going to flatten everything out, and that's only exacerbated by how bright everything is. I also don't know if this was the right composition. I mean, sure, you show everything, but it's not a very interesting composition as a result. Next up, we have a house for a real estate agent. First thing, this is mostly a picture of a kitchen island. I would have either backed up and gotten higher. I don't know if there's a wall behind or something that prevented that, but getting higher is definitely going to help because 30% of this frame is this. And if this was for the cabinet maker, sure, that's one thing, but it's for a real estate agent, and you got to show more of the space, not just more of this one single island here. So back up, get higher. In terms of lighting, it's okay. It's a little bit flat. Again, I see that you lit it from the same direction as the camera was facing, which tends to give it that sort of on-camera flash overlit look. There's no real depth, especially to the ceiling. But mostly the problem here that I see is composition. Again, you got to get higher, and that would allow us to see down into the kitchen rather than just straight into that island. Moving right along here. Boston, Massachusetts. Shot for a construction company. I'm from there and I can't even pronounce it sometimes. Um, this to me looks pretty good. I don't know about the light trails down here. They're just so bright. And something that jumps out at me is this doesn't seem like it's perfectly vertical. It's off like by a degree or something, and it's kind of bugging me. I would like to see a couple people down here kind of milling around, maybe some figures just for scale, or some kind of activity down here. It just feels to me like I said, I grew up in the Boston area, and this, even though I can tell that it's like maybe it looks like September or something, it feels like the middle of winter because it's bare and empty and kind of there's no life to it, and that's what happens in Boston in the winter. Things become empty. So I would add a little bit of life, a little bit of human activity to the shot. Manhattan, shot for a construction company. This I'm beginning to like a little bit more. Again, I think the composition is a little bit funky. The chair back right in front of the camera isn't really doing it for me. I would have considered pulling it out entirely so that we could have seen more of the design of that really cool table. The staging and styling, to me, it kind of looks like, like my first real estate starter kit staging pack with the napkins folded and the rings and everything. It's kind of to me, I don't know, it's kind of cheesy. But mostly I would say composition, and again the lighting seems a little bit flat. There's not a lot of shadow or dimension to the objects in the frame. What might have been interesting is if you, instead of shooting right over the table, you came like 3 or 4 feet left and cropped it down the center of the table, because we don't need to see the entire table to know that there's a table there. And over here the view isn't doing anything for me. So maybe if you shifted left a little bit, or just moved the whole camera left, picked up more of this leading line in the ceiling, it could have, had been a more dynamic, more interesting photograph with a bit more motion to it. Moving right along, this looks like BB-8, medical center. So I'm assuming this is some kind of MRI machine or some kind of imaging thing. I don't know enough about the assignment, but to me, it's very difficult without knowing exactly what it is to know what this is a photograph of. Is it a robot? Is it a hospital room? Is it some future? It looks like it could be like Hal from Space Odyssey. So, I mean, it is a very graphic composition, but I don't think the lighting is helping you. Again, I think you could have been more dramatic with the lighting. Had the light come from behind this object and come towards the camera, it would have really helped to accentuate the composition. You do have some really cool leading lines, but I think the flatness of the light sort of does you a disservice here. Moving right along, this is the Clark Art Institute, shot for a construction company. Again, I think what's going on here is you like architectural photography and you really enjoy it, but you don't have a tilt-shift lens, and it's killing me a little bit. Unless this was shot for the concrete company, it feels like we're looking straight down at the floor because you're not shifted up. If you shifted up maybe, I don't know, a significant amount, maybe like if you shifted up halfway with the lens and got more of the ceiling, more of the sky, more of I feel like this would have been more balanced in the frame. This is a very heavy object, both literally and visually. It would have been anchored a bit more to the bottom. Things kind of feel a little bit top heavy to me, and I'd like to see more sky, more ceiling, less floor. And I think if you did that, it would have been a much stronger composition. I don't know how I feel about the woman back here in the sort of poncho. It doesn't really add anything to me. It would have been cool if you had like some kids playing out here, or if you had, some people looking at an exhibit to the right or something, or to the left. I don't know if having people on the very edge of the frame is helping you. And the guy, again, like the kind of portly fellow back there, don't think he adds anything. I would have liked to have seen more motion right in the front of the frame if we're going to go that way. Here's a restaurant, and first thing that jumps out at me is, again, the lighting. You have this blue hot spot back here. I'm assuming that's from a window behind you, and that's daylight coming in, bouncing off the floor, off the ceiling, and giving you that reflection. So I would have flagged the window behind me entirely. And again, that not only is the light here very flat, but it's also blue from the exterior. And this could work if your composition was different, but again, since we have that light coming from behind us, it tends to flatten everything out and give this sort of funky blue cast. Again, I don't know if this is the composition. I maybe would have gone with something a little more artistic, maybe some asymmetry here to offset, you know, I guess what I'm saying is I just don't think this one piece of furniture is interesting enough to build an entire photo around it. I think a more graphic image would have been a more effective detail or something. Again, so maybe crop it like down the middle here, down 1/3 in. Don't need to see that other table. Crop it, put this off-centered. Work with the staging, come up a little bit higher, put some food on the table, do something interesting. But again, I don't think this subject as it is composed is interesting enough for its own photo. Here we have a private residence in Manhattan. This is pretty cool, but it looks a little bit real estate-y to me. It's very overlit, very bright, very white. Again, I think a little more natural direction to the light. This is our huge light source right here, but there's light coming from the camera, and it flattens out this piece of furniture. I think you're a little bit too wide. This looks, again, I love to say it, but it looks like a giant aircraft carrier because it's kind of stretched out by lens distortion. The zipper here, it was a 2-second Photoshop. I would have zapped it. But otherwise, I think this is okay. I would have loved to see a dog or something down here just to kind of fill in that empty bit of space. But mostly my critique here is that the lighting is, again, very flat. But you have this beautiful, beautiful soft light source. I would use that more to your advantage next time. Private residence Boston, shot for a builder. I'm kind of digging this one. I really like the space. Again, I think the composition lets you down. I would have liked to see a 1-point perspective, or if you had kind of backed up a little bit and gone a little higher, because there's not enough separation here between the countertop and the island and the table and the cabinets down here. I like to be able to visually walk through a frame so I can see the floor. And again, here everything tends to blend together when you have this. Everything is on one line, right? So space your composition out a little bit, give it some more room to breathe. Maybe that's backing up, maybe it's higher, maybe it's taking 2 steps to your left and shooting straight down this really cool table. I think the processing is better here, but again, composition is the most important thing of any photograph, and you're doing yourself kind of a disservice by being so close and so wide and making this table look gigantic, losing everything here down this line. So I think that is the last photograph. I hope that you learned something. I may have been a little bit hard on some of these, but again, I really want to drive home the importance of, first and foremost, composition, and second, using light to bring out dimension in the objects and the architecture of the rooms that we're shooting. All right, so like I said at the beginning, these critiques are open to anyone who has purchased one of my architectural photography tutorials in the past. If you want to check those out, they can be found at fstoppers.com/store. I think I've got 2 or 3 out at this point, and they go into all things architectural photography, and we have a great Facebook group of everyone who has purchased. We're always bouncing ideas off of each other and learning and making our architectural photography better together. So check those out, and hope to hear from you soon. So check those out. Hope to hear from you soon, and I'll get back to making more of these next week. See you guys later.